Welcome to PL Together Lounge Talks. I'm Adam Geller, founder and CEO of Edthena. Today, we're talking with Ayodele Harrison. He is a former classroom teacher, currently the senior partner of education at Community Build Ventures, and he's also a mentor to Black male educators. Ayodele, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we were just talking about how to begin the process of becoming anti-racist. And in that discussion, you brought up the idea that as an educator and really just as a human, you need to be taking care of yourself emotionally. You said the emotional self-care. I know you also use another word with that phrase often, which is the healing part of the process. So yeah, I mean, I guess like take us through this. Like, if I'm thinking like, what do you mean? Like, I'm doing fine. Like, am I doing fine? Does that just mean I'm like lying to myself?
Well, here's the thing. We understand that for some time, previously, like 1950s, oral health was not something that we took very seriously. And this idea of brushing our teeth was something that was brand new, right? This idea, I remember I heard something on ESPN where it was talking about like this idea of jogging or getting out and running and doing regular exercise was not something that was a part of our consciousness, but we begin to understand the health benefits, right, of this. And so there are so many health benefits when we begin to engage emotional self-care and self-care in that particular space. And so it's important that we begin to engage just with something as simple as the breath. And we know that biologically, we cannot survive without our breath, but it is able to bring us calm. It is able to take us from our most survival mode, our most, mammalic place in our brain, reptilic place in our brain, to our prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of our brain, to really be able to, where our thinking, our processing, our structures, our understanding are able to come from. And so having these practices that allow us to be our best functioning self, our most resilient self, this is something that's really, really powerful and important for us to practice. We can't just assume that it's going to happen by taking a break or sleeping. Those are things that can help us physically, but emotional self-care, I think one of the things that's important is for us to differentiate that there is care, like health care, there's physical care, but emotional self-care is really about anything you do deliberately to take care of your emotional health and well-being. So that's what's really key for us in this time.
I think you said something there at the end that feels really important, which is it's a deliberate practice, right? So maybe you were, doing things previously that were keeping you in a good emotional place, but this idea of doing it deliberately or routinely is maybe what is new, or is what is kind of how people should be thinking about the importance of bringing this into their everyday. Let's say I feel like I'm swimming in the deep end, and obviously that could be for a variety of reasons. As an educator, it could be because of everything going on this year. As a adult, it could be because of trying to be an adult in the time of COVID. Whatever it might be. It could be because I don't have a job, maybe. So where do I start for building the habits? So you can certainly tell us a habit or two, and I know you even mentioned some, but where do I start for building the habits? But you don't get to tell me Google this time.
Well, I will say two things. Where you can begin is with the breath, right? Taking a moment to take a deep breath in and out, and being present with your breath in that particular moment. That is always available to you, and it's free. There are, if you see athletes before they begin a process, what do? Right? And that's the centering practice. That is a form of emotional self-care. Yes, you can sit and do, and I teach people focused breathing that goes on for 5, 10, or 20 minutes. We can meditate, but it's also available to us in that particular moment. But then also this practice of going beyond that is, when we talk about emotional self-care, is really thinking about, one of the things we can dive into is self-talk. How do we talk to ourselves? What are the ways that we engage, right? One of the exercises that we do in one of the classes that I lead is this idea of, let's say a friend is going through a very challenging time. Maybe they messed up in a very public presentation. They lost out on their contract and they came to you and said, I was a complete failure. What would you say? What would you do? And we have people practice saying that, right? And they would say words to encouragement. And then we ask them to think about, what if you did that? What would you say to yourself? Right. And so those words that we often say to ourselves are a lot more destructive, and the words that we say to other are constructive. So emotional self-care is about analyzing, pausing to interrogate the ways that we talk to ourselves, the ways that, how can we take some of our most loving, kind words that we use for others and use them for ourselves on a daily basis, on a regular basis. And so one of the things that we lead, this practice that comes from Emory University's Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics, they talk about this idea of a practice of, it's kind of like a mantra. I've turned it into a mantra of saying, I will practice reminding myself that I have a fundamental desire for well-being and wish to avoid suffering. So it's this idea that I have a desire. I might not be in a space of well-being, but I have a desire for it, right? And I want to avoid suffering. There's nothing wrong with wanting to avoid suffering. We have to acknowledge and make space. One of the other things that I've turned into a mantra, this idea of, I will practice accepting my limitations and vulnerabilities with kindness and understanding. How many times are we able to say that to ourselves? I know as a Black male, me saying that I have limitations, that goes against everything that I've kind of been taught, whether it's me as an athlete on a football field, like, you could do it, you can run through a brick wall, you can do, all of those things to get me motivated to do, right? Is I've been taught that I am, the sky's the limit. I can do anything. I can be all, I can have my cake and eat it too. When the reality is I have limitations and I am going to be vulnerable. I'm 6'2", 325 pounds, right? I could walk through the space and I've seen people turn the other direction and leave and because of my presence. And so I can feel like this more formidable, but we know that seasons change. I can get sick. I know that I'm going to experience loss. I know that I'm going to experience some sort of dissatisfaction. So it's understanding that I'm not in full control. And so that's some ways that we can begin to think about some of the ways that we practice emotional self-care that goes beyond health and beauty, beyond going to get a massage or going to hang out with the fellas and play basketball, or going to get a haircut, or going to get a bar of ice cream, ice cream cone, or treating myself to shopping or something like that. That is self-care, but emotional self-care is when we get to the ideas of our thinking, our understanding, and how we relate with that. And everybody has space to work on that. Even though I've been teaching this work for over 3 years now, I'm still running up against learning edges saying, oops, I thought I didn't have any limitations. I do. How do I now navigate that and continue to grow and experience joy in the way that I so desire, even though I'm facing this idea that I might not be able to overcome this particular situation in this moment?
Your description of the positive self-talk and the mantras reminded me of a practice that I've heard about, which is the gratitude journal, where every day you just write down something good that happened to you today, or something that you did well today. And it could be small, but there's research that proves that can actually improve your emotional well-being.
Yeah, I will say that's why within our Brave Space protocol, we begin with gratitude, right? And I myself have struggled with relationships where I remember I was on part of my morning practice, I was writing in the gratitude journal where I was forcing myself to think about positive, like, things I'm grateful for with that person that I might be having a struggle with. And I literally I would sit there, and it was this practice of trying to, what I've often said is we're trying to soften this hold on keeping people in a box or a category. And I'm not saying releasing, because I think it's false to believe that we can release and let go of everything. Oh, don't mind that, just let it. But what we can do is or a better way to think of it, instead of holding it as a fist of like, I don't like this person, we're always having this issue. If I'm able to find a moment of gratitude, something that I can see. I thank them for being alive, for being present. I thank them for even just, driving me home or whatever that might be. With the gratitude, I can begin to loosen, right? I can loosen my grip around where I'm holding them in that space. And what I do is I'm actually able to recapture that energy, right? And I can place that energy in a place that I feel is more healthy. And so one of the things I want to back up and say is that we often get into this duality nature of positive, negative. It's really more of what's healthy for us and what might be harmful for us, right? There are times where sadness is really helpful for us. Grieving is very helpful for us. That's not a negative emotion, right? It is just an emotion that we can now see benefit of. Like, I now recognize how important that person or thing was to me, and I can grieve it, right? I can be in that emotional space and actually be very healthy. The key is, how long am I staying in that emotional place, right? Is it now serving me a day from now, a week from now, 10 years from now? I'm not the one to decide that, the other person is. So it's really about gratitude allows us to have this space for learning to take place. And that's what I think is one of the great benefits of having a gratitude journal.
Thinking about if you're a school leader trying to encourage the educators in your community to adopt these practices, it probably doesn't work well to tell them to do it. So maybe a menu of ideas. And also, I think I hear you repeating something, which is that it can be modeled in the other structures in the way you're leading. So for example, if you're a leader who's helping create these brave spaces, if part of that is demonstrating and modeling the gratitude and the positive thinking, then suddenly the idea of adopting one of these practices for yourself isn't so far afield from what you might have experienced or what you may believe will lead to something that feels good for you, because obviously we're all motivated by wanting to feel good.
And if I can say, you had brought this up because I think this is really important, is I like to think of the idea of like weaponizing wellness, right? Like, you have to do this. What we're doing is, it's more about creating space for it. So one is modeling it, but with our brave space, we invite all to participate, but you don't have to participate in that. So I'm not, so, because what I've seen is, I mean, we as educators, we love lifting and transporting into our classroom and trying to do right away. And so this also happens with wellness practices where I think of my 6-year-old, and she's with her school, she's learned breathing practices. And when she is, at a very heightened sense of emotion and all these things are going on and she might be angry, I'm not in that moment gonna say, breathe, you need to sit down and do your meditation, you need to practice this. That's weaponizing it. What we do is we create space and say, can we lean on something that will help us calm and be in that space? So school leaders, are often saying I believe they're all well-intentioned about wanting their staff to be well. The key is, part of wellness, part of that healing is, that you mentioned earlier, is about inviting people to take part, but not requiring them to take part, right? So it might be, you might start off in the morning, a meeting like, hey, let's just take, I invite us all to take a collective breath together. I'm not looking around to make sure that if people are taking a collective breath together, and I'm not checking them off and doing that, I'm just saying we're going to have that. And I want to open this up with a brave space. Would anybody like to share a moment of gratitude, right, with them? And I might lead as a school leader to do that if I believe that, but I'm not going to go around and make sure everybody in the room does that, because now they might not be in a space where they can access gratitude, but now they have to manufacture something in a compliance mode for you in that situation. That's not helping anybody.
I know that Community Build Ventures, you guys have an online resource that's available right now. So I want to make sure to mention that to everyone. It's called Get Out of the Fire. Give us the, 60, no, not even the 60-second. Give us the 3-sentence, what is it and why might I be interested in checking it out?
Sure. If you're feeling overworked, overwhelmed, underappreciated, this is a space for you to learn tools to empower, to enhance your sense of emotional well-being, your practice. We will introduce you to various breathing practices and other things, and also teach you about the science of brain chemistry and the fight, flight, or freeze. So you'll learn about all that, and we will guide you along with some wellness practices that you might invite into your practice as you move forward. And it's free. So just know that when you go on our website, it is free for the remainder of the year. There's an offer code, and it's Juneteenth, because that's when we actually launch the free platform. And Engage. It's this is more than 3 sentences. I'm sorry. It's 5 videos. There's a workbook that's included, all of these things so that you can get a better sense of what an emotional self-care practice is and begin it.
So if that sounds interesting, head to communitybuildventures.com. It's on their website. It's front and center. You will see it. Before we head out, Ayodele, I want to ask you our extra credit question.
Okay.
The question here is, thinking about all that has changed in life since coronavirus has come onto the scene, what is one thing that has changed that you hope will continue, or that you want to try to continue for yourself in your daily routines or practices or ways that you're working with folks?
So Adam, how long do I have? Because I can tell you, I think one of the practices that has changed for me, and I think for many parents, I've actually had a very active role in my children's learning. You know, with my child being in kindergarten last year when the pandemic began and in-person learning had stopped, I went to parent meetings. I got the printout, all the checklists. I actually got a chance to sit alongside my daughter while she was learning and experience learning and understand how she learned. I wouldn't trade that for the world. I realized, even as an educator, how little I knew about the way that my child learned, and how well my teachers were leading them through that process. So for me, I don't want to go back to not having such an active role, in her life. Because as we all know, we got the commute and all these things, and we might have between 5:30 and 7:30 to really engage, and that's bath time, that's food, that's homework. There's not a lot of time to do a lot of extra reading and sight words. And so for me in this time, it's been being able to spend time and have an increased role in my child's learning.
Well, Ayodele, thank you so much for being part of PL Together. If you're watching this conversation and wondering what we talked about before this segment, or wondering who else I've talked to, head to pltogether.org for a lot more. Ayodele Harrison, thank you again.
Thank you for having me.